The night of the mating ceremony was cold and clear, the kind of night the elders said the moon watched closest. Hundreds of wolves gathered in the great clearing at the heart of Blackthorn territory, torches burning along the tree line, their light flickering over anxious faces. Every unmated wolf in the pack stood in rows, waiting for the bond to choose for them, the way it had chosen for their parents and grandparents before them. Lyra Hale stood near the back, half hidden behind taller wolves, hoping no one would notice her. She was used to being overlooked. Her wolf was weaker than most, her family line unremarkable, and she had spent her whole life being told, quietly and not so quietly, that she did not matter much to the pack's future. She had stopped expecting anything from ceremonies like this one. She only came because attendance was required. At the front of the clearing, on a raised stone dais, stood Alpha King Cale Ashgrove. He was the kind of leader people spoke about in hushed, respectful tones. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a presence that made the air feel heavier when he walked through a room. He had led Blackthorn since his father's death, and under his rule, the pack had grown stronger, richer, and more feared than it had been in generations. Wolves admired him. Wolves also feared him, though few would say so out loud. The ceremony began the way it always did. One by one, wolves stepped forward, and the pack's oldest seer called out the names of those whose bonds had sparked. Matches were rare, unpredictable, and always met with cheers. Lyra watched from the back, quietly hoping the night would end without her name being called at all. She did not want the attention. She had learned that attention, for her, usually turned into ridicule. Then the seer's eyes found her. "Lyra Hale," the old woman said, her voice carrying easily across the clearing. "Step forward." Lyra's stomach dropped. She walked forward on legs that did not feel like her own, aware of every whisper rippling through the crowd. When she reached the front, the seer took her hand and turned her gently toward the dais, toward the Alpha King himself. The moment their eyes met, something inside Lyra's chest ignited. It was not gentle, it was not soft, it felt like lightning tearing through her ribs, a pull so powerful it nearly knocked her off her feet. She gasped, pressing a hand to her heart, and across the clearing she saw Cale stagger back half a step, his jaw tightening, his eyes going wide with something that looked almost like horror. The bond had chosen them, her and the Alpha King. For one heartbeat, the clearing was silent. Then the whispers began, spreading through the crowd like wildfire. The Alpha King, bonded to her. It did not seem possible. It did not seem fair, some of the whispers suggested, though Lyra could not tell if they meant fair to her or fair to him. Cale's face had gone hard, unreadable. He looked at her the way a man might look at an unexpected storm, something he had not planned for and did not want. Lyra held her breath, waiting, hoping, foolishly, that he might step down from the dais and take her hand the way the old stories said a true mate should. Instead, he turned to the pack. "This bond will not be honored," he said, his voice carrying easily over the crowd, cold and final. "I reject it." The words hit Lyra like a physical blow. Mate rejection was not simply a matter of pride. It was a wound that cut into the deepest part of a wolf's spirit, a tearing away of something that had only just begun to grow. She felt it rip through her chest, sharp and merciless, and her knees buckled beneath her. She collapsed to the ground in front of the entire pack, gasping, unable to catch her breath, unable to stop the tears that came without her permission. No one moved to help her. A few wolves nearby stepped back, as if her pain might be contagious. Cale did not look at her again. He turned and walked off the dais, disappearing into the crowd of pack members who parted for him like water around a stone. Lyra did not remember how she got home that night. She only remembered lying on her small bed afterward, staring at the ceiling, feeling as though something essential had been carved out of her and left hollow. The weeks that followed were the hardest of her life. Word of her rejection spread through the pack quickly, and with it came a new kind of cruelty. Wolves who had once simply ignored her now found reasons to mock her outright. She was the girl the Alpha King had refused in front of everyone. She was proof, some said, that her bloodline truly was as weak as people had always whispered. She was moved to the lowest tasks in the pack, cleaning, hauling, work no one else wanted. She ate alone, she trained alone, when she trained at all. But something else began to grow inside her during those long, lonely weeks. Grief slowly hardened into something steadier. She began waking earlier, running the forest trails before anyone else was awake, pushing her body harder than she ever had before. She was tired of being weak. She was tired of being someone easy to dismiss. One morning, deep in the forest, she came across a wolf she had never seen before. He was older, gray at the muzzle, with scars along his shoulder that spoke of many battles. He introduced himself as Thane, a rogue who had left his own pack years ago and now lived alone in the wild borderlands. He had watched her running the same trail for days, he said, and told her, quite bluntly, that her form was terrible and her instincts untrained. Lyra could have been offended. Instead, she asked him to teach her. Thane agreed, on one condition. She had to be willing to work harder than she ever had in her life. She agreed without hesitation. Over the following months, Thane trained her in secret, teaching her to fight, to track, to control the shift between wolf and human form, with a precision most pack wolves never learned. He taught her patience. He taught her to listen to her own instincts rather than the voices of people who had spent years telling her she was less than others. Slowly, painfully, Lyra rebuilt herself from the ground up. She did not return to the pack a different person exactly. She returned as the person she had always been capable of becoming. While Lyra trained in secret, trouble was building on Blackthorn's borders. The Draven Coalition, a rival group of packs to the east, had grown bold under a new and ruthless leadership. Rumors reached Blackthorn of a bloodline among the Draven warriors that carried a rare resistance to alpha commands, a trait so uncommon it had not been seen in generations. If true, it meant Kael's greatest weapon as Alpha King, his ability to command obedience from any wolf under attack, would be useless against them. The rumors proved true. Draven forces began raiding Blackthorn's outer territories, striking quickly and vanishing before Kael's warriors could organize a proper response. Pack losses mounted. Fear spread through Blackthorn for the first time in years. Kael, for all his strength and skill, found himself facing an enemy his command could not simply overpower. The pack elders convened in secret, searching old records for anything that might help. What they found was a legend so old, most had assumed it was only a story. The Second Bond, they called it. According to the ancient texts, when a mate bond was rejected and later reforged, not out of duty but by the free and equal choice of both wolves, it created a connection stronger than any first bond could ever be. An alpha bonded this way was said to gain strength beyond ordinary measure, strength that could turn the tide of even the most desperate battle. There was only one wolf alive who shared such a bond with Kael, Lyra. When the elders brought the news to Kael, he said nothing for a long time. He had spent months trying not to think about her, trying to convince himself that his rejection had been the right choice, the necessary choice, the choice a king had to make. He told himself he had done it to protect the pack, to prevent enemies from ever using a mate bond against him, the way one had been used against his own parents years before, in an attack that had left him an orphan before he was old enough to understand what loss truly meant. But the truth was quieter and harder to face. He had never stopped feeling the pull of that bond, not for a single day since he had rejected it. He had simply buried the feeling beneath duty and fear, the same way he had buried so much else since becoming king. Now his pack was dying at the borders, and there was only one path forward. He found Lyra at the edge of the training grounds Thane had shown her, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the clearing. She was stronger now, her stance different, her eyes steadier than they had been the night he rejected her. When she saw him approaching, she did not flinch or look away. She simply waited. Kael stopped a few steps from her, and for the first time since she had known him, the powerful Alpha King looked uncertain. "I was wrong," he said. The words came out rough, unpracticed. "I let fear decide something that should have been yours and mine to decide together. I hurt you in front of everyone who was supposed to respect you, and I have no right to ask anything of you now. But my pack is dying, Lyra, and you are the only chance we have left." Lyra studied him for a long moment. The old pain was still there, somewhere beneath the strength she had built, but it no longer controlled her the way it once had. "You didn't come here for me," she said quietly. You came here for the pack. I came here for both, Chaol said. I should have said that from the beginning. I was afraid of what loving you might cost me. I told myself I was protecting Blackthorn. Really, I was protecting myself. That is the truth, and you deserve to hear it plainly. It was the most honest thing she had ever heard him say. Lyra thought of the months of humiliation, the whispers, the nights she had cried herself to sleep, believing she was worthless. She thought of every step of the long, hard road that had brought her to this clearing, stronger and steadier than she had ever been. She was not the same wolf he had rejected. She would not simply hand herself back to him out of pity or obligation. If we do this, she said, it will not be as your subordinate, not as someone who owes you gratitude for finally noticing me. I want to stand beside you as your equal, in front of the whole pack, the same way you humiliated me in front of them. You will admit what you did was wrong, publicly, before anyone speaks of any bond between us again. Chaol did not hesitate. Whatever you ask, you have my word. 3 days later, the pack gathered once more in the great clearing, this time under the weight of looming war rather than celebration. Chaol stood before them and, without excuses or softened words, admitted the truth of what he had done. He had let fear override respect. He had wronged a wolf who deserved far better, and he asked the pack to witness him making it right, not because tradition demanded it, but because it was the honest thing to do. Lyra stepped forward to stand beside him, and this time, when their eyes met, there was no rejection waiting behind his gaze. The bond between them reignited, deeper and steadier than it had been the first time, forged now by choice rather than chance alone. The old legend proved true. Power surged through the pack's bond lines, strength the elders had only read about in fading old texts. 2 days later, when the Draven Coalition launched its largest assault yet, Blackthorn was ready. Chaol led the charge with a strength even his own warriors had never seen in him, and beside him, Lyra fought with the skill Thane had spent months building in her, precise and unshaken. Together they broke the enemy's advance, driving the Draven forces back across the border, in a battle that pack historians would speak of for years afterward. When the fighting ended and the territory was finally safe, the pack gathered once more, this time to celebrate rather than mourn. Chaol stood before them and named Lyra his true Luna, not as a formality required by the bond, but as a public declaration of respect, earned through everything she had endured and everything she had become. The pack that had once mocked her now looked at her differently, some with quiet shame for how they had once treated her, others simply with the respect any wolf who had helped save their home deserved. Lyra did not need their approval anymore. She had found something far more important during her months of exile, the understanding of exactly what she was capable of, with or without anyone else's permission to believe it. She stood now, where she had once collapsed in humiliation, not as an afterthought forced into the shadow of a king, but as his equal, chosen freely, and fought for honestly. The rejection that had once nearly broken her had, in the end, forged something far stronger than either of them could have imagined that cold ceremony night. And this time, when Chaol looked at her, the whole pack could see it plainly. There was nothing left to hide.